We are studying the book of Samuel together. And how many of you enjoyed last week's introduction to the book of Samuel and just loved kicking off this series? We are looking first and foremost at the first 3 chapters of Samuel, which is about the call of Samuel. Samuel is born and called by God at a really critical moment in the life of the nation of Israel. He comes at the end of one era, and he helps usher in a new era. He comes at the end of the era of judges, and he helps usher in the era of kings. So up until this point, Israel has been functioning loosely as 12 independent tribes in the Promised Land. They are loosely connected. There's not a lot of unity happening. And within the 12 tribes, the people are going their own way. They are living however they please. And this just results in a lot of wickedness, sin, and evil amongst the Israelites. It seems that God's plan has gone off the rails of what he is trying to accomplish. And it looks like, what are we going to do now? God raises up different judges during this period. It's about a 300-year period. He raises up different judges in different tribes, calling people back to him, seeing many revivals taking place. So there's some hope that's happening in the midst of the era of judges. But as the book comes to a close, it ends with these disparaging words. Judges 21, verse 25. The last verse of the book. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. And this is the environment that Samuel is born into. And God raises Samuel up to accomplish something newer and greater than any of the previous judges. He calls all the people back to God. He unites all the tribes under Yahweh's authority. He leads this resistance against a large Philistine threat, and he prepares the nation for a coming king. Samuel's really an incredible character. He's a judge, he's a prophet, he's a priest, he's a leader, and he does all of these things with character, with integrity, with strength, courage. He's obedient to God, and he really helps bring the people back to the plan and the promise of God. But before we actually get to Samuel, we're talking about Hannah. And in our passage today, Samuel hasn't even been born. And in our passage last week, we focused on Hannah. And last week, in verses 1 through 11, we saw how Hannah, this amazing woman, relies upon and utilizes the prayer of anguish. She's suffering with barrenness. She's going through torment. She's feeling abandoned by God. And she holds firm and fast to God through the prayer of anguish. She pours out her heart to God during her trials and difficulties, keeping herself rooted, faithful, and committed to God. Today, Hannah is going to become an even more impressive figure for us because we are going to see something new emerge in her as she embodies the verse that is found in Proverbs 19:11. And it says this: "A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense." The Bible tells us and teaches us, be slow to anger and slow to speak. But how many times are we often quick to anger and quick to speak, especially when we feel offended by somebody? In our story today, Hannah has an interaction with Eli, and she is going to demonstrate what 1 Corinthians 13:5 says. Love is not easily provoked. Taking up an offense restricts love. If you and I can imagine our life like a water hose, and the love of God is just pouring out of our life towards people, love is just flowing from us, the love of God, when we choose to take up an offense, it's like we kink the hose, and we stop the flow of the water. Hannah is a woman who keeps the love of God flowing through her as Eli comes at her and basically provokes her. I imagine that her dealing with Peninnah, who we talked about last week, Elkanah's other wife, who tormented her constantly, taught her, she learned in the midst of that torment how not to take up an offense. Who is Eli? This person that comes and talks to her and says something to her that would basically offend most of us. Well, Eli was a priest, and Eli was the one who oversaw the worship and the sacrifices and the festivals at the house of the Lord in Shiloh. Shiloh was located in the hill country of the Ephraim tribe, in the tribal region there. And this would have been north of Jerusalem, and you'll see that on the map on the screen. Jerusalem really hadn't been established yet at this time. Shiloh ended up becoming the early first capital city for the Israelites, basically. Because as Joshua 18:1 states, it says that all of the Israelites, as the tribes were being given land and as they were sort of setting up the promised land for themselves after they had come in, it says that they established the tabernacle of God in Shiloh. They erected it there. That's where they put it. So it basically became the gathering point and place for the Israelites. So when they wanted to worship, make sacrifices, be a part of the feasts and festivals that God had ordained through the giving of the law, they would all come and gather at Shiloh. And this is where Eli presided as the chief priest over the tabernacle. And the Bible also says that his two sons were priests at this tabernacle as well. And we're going to learn about these two young men later on in our studies. So Elkanah and Hannah and their family would travel to Shiloh at different times of year to worship and sacrifice at the tabernacle. And this is where they are at right now. And Hannah is at the tabernacle in Shiloh praying and asking the Lord to give her a son, and she's unleashing her prayer of anguish. And the text tells us that Eli is observing her as she is praying, and that he then initiates a conversation with her. So we're going to walk through the conversation. We're going to look at what unfolds, and we're going to see how Hannah responds to Eli without taking up offense to him. And you and I are going to learn and glean stuff from her again as we seek to be followers of Jesus who demonstrate strength, resilience, and patience, and love. And this woman, Hannah, has so much to teach you and I, if we will let her. The conversation starts with Eli offering an assumption. Look at verse 12. It says that as Hannah kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart. Her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk. Let's replace the word thought with assume. Eli assumed this woman was drunk. He sees Hannah's behavior and makes this assumption that there is something going on here besides prayer because of the way she is praying. How many in this room have ever observed somebody's behavior and then made an assumption about what was going on with that person? Okay, I see one hand. So I'm going to ask, let's all just shout out yes if we can answer the question. Has anyone here made an assumption about somebody's behavior before? Yes. We've all done this, okay? Assumptions almost always or often are incorrect. And they lead to miscommunications, misunderstandings, confusions, conflicts, hurt feelings, or just missed opportunities to engage in connection and relationship. When I was living in Ann Arbor, working in the restaurant world, a family of four. Now, I'm not normally a host who seats people at the table. I'm a server. But the host was not at the door, and a family of four came in. So I made my way to the door, and I greeted the family, and I took them to their table with their menus, and I sat the family of four at their table, and I set down 4 menus, 3 regular menus and 1 kids menu. Now, you know, how many of you have seen a kids menu in a restaurant before? And it comes with crayons, it's normally a coloring sheet, and it's got the little menu printed on there what the kids under 12 normally can eat. I was seating this family of 4, I put the menus down, and the person that I gave the kids menu to looked up at me in indignation and said, "What is this?" And I looked at the person and I said, it's the kids menu. The menu's right there. You can order. This was the mother in the family, all right? It was a husband, a wife, and their 2 kids that were of college age. And I had assumed that this mother was under the age of 12. She looked young to me, all right? Now, she was so angry with me that I know that women like the compliment of looking young, but not like this, right? This was not good. And I didn't know how to recover from this, okay? I could not know how to recover. I'm so sorry. I shamefully walked back, grabbed a real menu, and brought it. And I was like, thankfully I don't have to wait on this table because I had lost this table already. Now, I will tell you, I've got children. And almost every time that I go into a restaurant, the host says, 4, and we'll say yes. Would you like any kids menus? They ask the question, and we'll say 1 kids menu, please. What did I not do in that moment is I didn't ask the question, and I just made the assumption that there was a child in the family, and I screwed it all up because I gave the mother a kids menu. There's another time where this one wasn't as bad. This one was there was a lot of harm done in that encounter, but this one there wasn't really any harm done. But I was waiting tables one night, and I worked in a really fine dining restaurant, really nice restaurant, and this woman came in by herself, dressed in jeans with a baseball cap on. And it was a no-no to dress like that coming into our restaurant. We didn't look for dresses and suits, but at least show up with business casual on, right? And let me just give a little bit of advice here. If you're going to a nice restaurant, don't wear flip-flops, don't wear shorts, and don't wear a baseball cap. Those are some rules of you walk in the door, the staff is already looking at you you don't belong in this room. That's what this woman walks in, jeans and a low baseball cap on, and I'm like, who does this woman think she is coming into this restaurant? Seat her. Now, I could have let my assumption about this woman not belonging in the restaurant affect the way that I gave service to this woman, but it didn't. And she ended up being a very pleasant young woman. I was talking with her. She had a wonderful meal. I had a whole narrative going on in my head. I was thinking, okay, this is a really nice young lady. She doesn't understand. She doesn't really eat at restaurants like this. Maybe she just got a raise and she has a bigger per diem expense from her company, and now she's in nicer restaurants than she normally eats in. I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt in terms of all this. So I'm making up this narrative this entire time as I'm just taking care of her and offering her recommendations because she said she wasn't from the area. It was her first time there. So we were just having these. And so I'm going through all of this, and at the end of the meal, she goes, she pays, she gives me her credit card. I go to the computer, I'm swiping the credit card, and as I look at the credit card, it says Hillary Swank on the credit card. All of my assumptions were wrong. This person was trying to hide. This person did not want to be noticed. This was a famous person who understood the restaurant industry, had eaten at way nicer restaurants than I had, the one that she was in just now. And if my assumptions would have gotten the best of me and then I would have treated her rudely based upon those assumptions, I would have been so far off. I was off base. It just didn't affect the encounter as much. God has blessed all of us with thoughts, with intuition, and the ability to evaluate. But there is a really big difference between possessing discernment and jumping to conclusions. And often what separates these two areas is having godly wisdom, maturity, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and being healed from our wounds in life. When we are unwise, when we are unaware, when we are unhealed, and when we are immature, we tend to make presumptions about people. But when we are wise, growing in wisdom, becoming more aware, healing and maturing, we are more likely to operate with discernment and catch ourselves before we act or speak from a place of assumption. Pete Scazzaro writes, God has given us an inner guidance system to move through life, think and feeling. It is essential that we pay attention to our thoughts and feelings, But then we must think about what to do with them. Knowing when to follow our feelings and when not to is indispensable if we are to grow up into spiritual adulthood in Christ. Basically, when you and I make assumptions about other people, we are telling ourselves a story about a person's mindset, about their state of being, or their intentions based upon what we are seeing and noticing, and oftentimes we are wrong. Eli was wrong. He observed Hannah's behavior, and he leapt to a wrong conclusion in his mind. So then what happens? And this is what often happens whenever we assume something internally. Eli then moves from an assumption into an accusation. Verse 14, he says to her, to Hannah, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine." Now, asking good questions is a great way to verify our assumptions. But in this case, Eli's question is really an accusatory statement in the form of a question. It's judgmental, it's demeaning, it's self-righteous, it's dripping with condemnation. It is just downright rude what he says to her. When assumptions enter our minds, we need to be able to catch ourselves, question ourselves, and remind ourselves that we are in fact leaping to an unverified conclusion. For instance, let's say that Rob Hall, who is here today, Rob hasn't made eye contact with me all morning. Rob hasn't talked to me all morning. It feels like when I move to one side of the room, Rob moves to the other side of the room. And as I notice this behavior that he is demonstrating, I begin to think about something, and I recognize it has been a while since I have texted a GIF to Rob. And I know that Rob loves GIFs being texted to him because it cheers him up, makes him happy. And it's been a while. And I'm like, oh boy, I have forgotten to send a gift to him. And he is not talking to me. He's angry with me. He doesn't want anything to do with me. Now, if you don't know, Rob loves Disney. And so Disney gifts are the way to go whenever you're sending something Rob's direction. I've cleared all this with Rob beforehand, all right? He knows that I'm saying something, okay? None of this is true, but he does love Disney. But here I am in my own head. He's not looking at me. He's not talking to me. He's moving to the other side of the room from me. And I am just talking, oh, I've messed up. I haven't paid attention to him. I haven't pastored him in the way that he wants to be pastored in this moment. He's losing respect for me. Look at him. He's talking to Jill over there. They're laughing. They're laughing about me. They're talking about how this is their last week here at the church. They're so happy that they're going to leave here and never come back again, all because I've not sent him a GIF in a while. Okay, so I'm at this point where this narrative's building in my head. I have three things I can do at this point. I can either dismiss the assumption, dismiss the narrative, I can verify my assumption, or I can accept the assumption. Really, those are the three options that I have. And when we accept the assumption to be true, without learning to dismiss certain assumptions, without learning how to verify them, when we accept these assumptions, we will then act upon the assumption in some way, the way Eli acted upon his assumption, by confronting Hannah. So maybe in my just accepting the assumption in the narrative, the story I'm telling myself, I choose to ignore Rob. I choose to go and talk bad about him behind his back to other people. Or maybe I just confront Rob and just be like, listen, this is unfair. You cannot have such high of an expectation of me to text you a GIF every week. Acting on unverified assumptions is a recipe for disaster. And let me be clear, Rob is not looking for me to text gifts to him every week. It's every other week. After Eli's assumption, after Eli's accusation, we come to Hannah's answer. Look at verse 15. "Not so, my lord," Hannah replied. "I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. So as we look at Hannah's response, I want us to remember that this is a woman in a state of distress. This is a woman who is upset, in pain. She has been enduring mistreatment and torment. She has been living with societal shame for a very long period of time. And now she is being confronted by someone who has a lot of power, a lot of esteem, a lot of social capital, and she is looked down as a worthless nobody. And it is in her state of distress, it is her enduring this low social standing, that she responds, in my opinion, to Eli in such a restrained and amazing way. Her reply is so good. And this is like another indication for why you and I need to be listening to this woman and learning from this woman. Because she tells Eli the truth without becoming indignant or self-righteous. She tells Eli that he's wrong, but she does it from a place of vulnerability, admitting her pain. She comes across in an honest way with a non-defensive posture. It's as if she's responding to Eli without being offended in the moment. Now, let's admit the power dynamics at play could have caused some of this to happen and unfold this way. I think we should accept the fact that maybe a more measured response by her when she's dealing with the high priest. Maybe she didn't feel the freedom to just slap him in the face, claw his eyes out, pronounce a pox upon his house. How dare you do this, say this about me? See, I'm making up for it, Rob. That's a second gift that I'm giving you today. But it really seems that she's able to manage her own emotions in this moment, manage her feelings, and resist the temptation to react from a place of just letting herself get angry, indignant, upright, taking offense. Hannah challenges you and I to do better and be better in moments where we want to lash out, respond harshly, and just not offer grace to someone who has misread us, misinterpreted us, accuses us, or is just flat out wrong in their evaluation of us or a situation. I believe Hannah is showing us what can happen to us, what changes in us when we are people who know how to rely on the Lord, trust in the Lord, remain faithful to Him, and are filled with His Spirit. I'm sure Hannah's flesh wanted to respond one way, but the Spirit of God in her, even in the midst of her victimization, of her ostracization, of her misery, in her pain, all that is going on in her, God gave her the ability and the strength to be truthful, to be honest, to respond with clarity, to be graceful, and to be kind, even when Eli was so wrong and so rude. We don't see her becoming bitter. We don't see her seeking revenge. We don't see her becoming hostile. She keeps the love flowing from her life. She doesn't kink the hose when she is confronted by Eli. Truth is, I think most of us don't even come close to measuring up to this amazing woman. We don't exhibit self-control. We lash out. We don't show mercy. We judge. We don't correct. We punish. And I think it's because of Hannah's amazing Spirit-filled response that we see at the next part of the conversation that Eli becomes amiable. Look at verse 17. Eli says, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." The way Hannah answers Eli causes him to change his attitude. He goes from this accusatory place to being amiable. And amiable, if you don't know the meaning of the word, it just means becoming pleasant and friendly. It's the opposite of rude behavior. Now, I could have just said that Eli became pleasant and friendly, but I've got an alliteration going on here, people, and I got to keep the A's moving through the sermon points. I think it's somewhere in the Bible that says alliteration leads to salvation. I don't know where it's at, but it's somewhere in Scripture. The way you and I respond to assumptions and accusations can make all the difference in the world, preventing the breakdown of a relationship, blocking the encounter from continuing down a road to conflict or harm. My encouragement to us today is we want to feel the anger. We want to feel the offense, but then we need to learn how to take a deep breath and let them go, and to allow these feelings to pass through us, so that we can respond from a more gracious and Christ-centered place. And when we do, it can alter demeanors and dispositions, and it can change what is going on as we feel attacked with somebody coming at us. What does Proverbs 15:1 say? A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. What I am talking to us about today with what Hannah is able to accomplish is not easy. The book of James says the tongue is the hardest instrument of the body to control. But Paul also writes that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. It's ironic that Eli is now saying, go in peace, when he is the instigator. He is the one who is coming to disrupt the peace. He is the one that is coming on the attack. He's the one making the assumptions. He's the one making the accusations. And now he's like, go in peace, dear friend. He blesses her. He doesn't just bless her. In fact, the Hebrew actually can be translated here that he prophesies over her and tells her, God will give you the desires of your heart. Not that may God give you the desires of your heart, but I am proclaiming that God is going to give you the desires of your heart. Eli coming at her as an instigator, as an agitator. Now he's an advocate. He's an ally. And the response, when we are unfairly accused, unfairly blamed, unfairly labeled, man, we can bring reconciliation and redemption to the encounter if we learn how to not judge, how not to seek revenge. We don't have to get on a high horse. We don't have to respond in a way that escalates the situation. Thank you, Jemima, for your de-escalation training yesterday that many people attended. We can learn to respond in a way that helps transform a person from a posture of hostility to a posture of honor, which is exactly what we see happening here with Eli. How many of you remember what it says in the Bible that love covers a multitude of sins? And that is what I believe Hannah is doing here. As Eli sins against her, she allows love to rule the day. She doesn't take up offense and block the flow of love. She lets go and lets the love continue to flow. And as the conversation comes to an end, it says that Hannah regains her appetite. If you remember, this woman is so downcast and so depressed and so upset, she can't even eat. That's in the state that she's in. But it says in verse 18 that she went on her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Yes, the prophecy or the blessing from Eli went a long way to making this happen. Hannah comes into the house of the Lord distraught, upset. She's not eating, and she leaves a changed woman. She leaves content, so content that she's able to eat a meal again. Yes, Eli had his faults. I'm not making any excuses for Eli. Eli was clearly in the wrong here. Yes, Eli did something really stupid and really offensive, and Eli was a flawed man. But he wasn't cruel, and he redeemed himself with this blessing. And the Lord used Eli to encourage her, to bring hope to Hannah, and to soothe her spirit. I think the takeaway from this is that when we learn to not take offense, it doesn't just bless the other person with grace and mercy, it comes back to us. And it blesses us. It keeps unforgiveness and bitterness at bay. It keeps us peaceful, calm. It will do something. When we allow love to cover a multitude of sins, people then can become a blessing into our life versus becoming the irritant. Too often we're so quick to demonize people, create enemies out of people, people who are decent, but they've messed up. They've made a mistake. They've had a bad day. They said the wrong thing. They've put their foot in their mouth. I don't know about you, but that's me a lot of times. And here, Hannah operates as a peacemaker, responding well to Eli. And in return, through the grace shown to him, he is graceful and charitable to her, each of them enriched and blessed in some way. So we've made it through the encounter, and I believe it's super clear that the way Hannah responds to Eli is the centerpiece of this narrative. It is the truth of what we want to pull out of this narrative is seeing how Hannah was able to change and alter the dynamic of this interaction. And our text is revealing Hannah to be wiser, more mature than the high priest of Israel. Think about this. The narrator, the one writing the story, is giving you and I this unexpected twist and this look. It is not the highly esteemed, powerful, mighty priest, man of God, who is the hero of the story, who acts right and does right. No, it is the socially despised, childless woman that everybody looks down on and thinks has no worth. This is the one who gets it right, and this is the one who becomes our teacher and our leader. Are we like Eli? Do we make assumptions about people and then live into those assumptions? How's that working out for us, huh? I bet we're just making a mess of our relationships. Or we're quick to blame and judge others, quick to write people off. Never verifying the story that we're telling ourselves in our minds, but just living into those stories. Many of us have become an Eli in life because we have been hurt and wounded by people in the past. And these manifestations and us acting on these assumptions oftentimes flow out of these inner wounds that we have not brought to Jesus and have not found healing from. We are using our assumptions and our accusations as defense mechanisms. They are a way for you and I to keep people at a distance, to not let people get close, because we're broken, we're untrusting, and we are super, super sensitive. And I would assume that if you and I are like Eli, I bet we also react and respond to other Elis in the opposite way of Hannah. We take offense. We get angry. We let our hearts willingly deceive us. We take things personally. We escalate things. We overinflate what other people have said and done. We get defensive. We go on the offense. We pick up our sword, and we attack. We're quick to judge. We're quick to assume. We're quick to accuse. And we're quick to defend ourselves. We're quick to respond. And we're quick to lash out. Brant Hansen wrote a book called Unoffendable: How Just One Change Can Make All of Life Better. He writes, few want to hear this, but it's true, and it can be enormously helpful in life. If you're constantly being hurt, offended, or angered, you should honestly evaluate your inflamed ego. To grow in our capacity of becoming like Hannah, and to throw away the tricks and the tools of Eli, we have to grow in our willingness to love, to be vulnerable, and to open ourselves up to people, which creates a possibility of us being hurt. And in his book, The Bait of Satan, John Bevere writes, if we don't risk being hurt, we cannot give unconditional love. Unconditional love gives others the right to hurt us. You and I can't learn from Hannah and become more like her if we are people who hold on to our grudges, if we keep living with unforgiveness in our hearts, leaving our emotional wounds unattended to. These things keep us protected in a way and walled off in a way, and the problem with it is, yes, we're protected, yes, we're walled off, but we are not loving. The love has stopped. The love isn't flowing through us. The hose has been kinked. Trust me, you and I need to learn to become like Hannah, because Hannah was like Christ. She is a representation of Jesus. She models for us the behavior and the teaching of Jesus. Jesus, who says, love your enemies, do good to those who persecute you, who didn't give in to taking offense, but showed mercy and compassion on people instead, who displayed unconditional love by dying on the cross for a global people that are Eli's. It is the same Spirit that Jesus possessed, that Hannah possessed, that is available to you and I today. It is this same Spirit of God that can transform us, heal us, and turn us into peacemakers, reconcilers, grace givers. We can become Hannahs in a world that is hostile, broken, hurting, and quick to take offense. Hannah could have responded with anger, but she didn't. And God has every right to respond to you and I with anger. God has every right to be offended by our actions, by our lives, the way we live, the way we rebel against Him, the way we often get it wrong, the way that we desert Him, the way that we betray Him. God has every right to take offense to us at any given moment, but He refuses to do so. He continues to respond with love. One other quote from Brant Hansen's book: anger is extraordinarily easy. It's our default setting. Love is very difficult. Love is a miracle. Assumptions keep us from love. Accusations keep us from love. Defensiveness keeps us from love. Indignation keeps us from love. Unforgiveness keeps us from love. Grudges keep us from love. Entitlement keeps us from love. False narratives in our minds keep us from love. Judging others keeps us from love. Our taking offense keeps us from love. God is love. And if all of these things are keeping us from love, all of this junk is keeping us far away from God. Jesus shows us the way to love. He shows us that He is love. And Jesus can transform us through His power to become conduits of love. We have to let Him heal us. We have to let Him lead us. We have to let Him teach us. And we have to let Him dismantle us, tear us apart, and rebuild us up again through the power of His Spirit. Who in this room this morning is willing to take the step towards becoming like Hannah? You're in this room and you feel like you have been ostracized and victimized, and people mistreat you constantly, and you are marginalized. Like, this was Hannah. But yet God, in the midst of that, was able to give her a power and a strength to be a person of love. Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning, and we are confronted with the reality of so many of our shortcomings here in this moment. And Lord, I pray that our reaction would not be one of defensiveness, one of shutting down, one of walling ourselves off, but Lord, we would just accept the truth that we are broken people and we are prone to the behavior of Eli. And it's really, really hard to live into the behavior of Hannah. But Lord, this is what your Spirit wants to help with, to transform us, to impart unto us the fruits of the Spirit that give us the ability to continue to love. And Lord, it's such a shame. It is such a shame when we become offended so often because the world is deprived of love when we choose that road. Lord, I pray that there would be something in us this morning, something challenging, something rising up in us to say, I am going to open myself to the Lord, lay myself bare, and ask Him to deal with my offended heart. Lord, I pray your Spirit would be at work this morning, challenging us, pruning us, causing new life to grow. And may we be a people of love, and that love covers